Hello friends, this is Santhanam from Officers IAS Academy, and in this video we will try to study the economic exploitation of British in India through a case study, and we will study the economic exploitation of the cotton textile industry in India during British times. That's what we are going to see in today's video. And the cotton textile in India, the textile industry in India, that has had so much of growth and development, and the products developed by the cotton textile industry in India were in high demand all over the world. Not just cotton textile, textile industries in general. All over the world there was very high demand for Indian made textiles, Indian made cloths. Now, this is the reason why many a times Indian rulers were able to export the Indian goods out of India, and they were able to make a lot of money from the Western world. Mainly the Greeks and the Romans in the ancient times, and the Europeans in the medieval and modern times. Now, when the British came to India, they started changing this current scenario, and they started manipulating the economic policies in India in such a way that the Indian cotton textile industries were completely dismantled. So now we will try to understand how they accomplished their devious goal. See, as I just revealed, Indian cotton clothes were in very high demand. So Indian clothes were in very high demand. The British, they also have a textile industry, and the British were also producing textiles which were purchased but not really in vogue, not in high demand. Now when the Indians, when they started exporting the Indian made cotton clothes, they have been exporting that since ancient times, and all over the world people welcomed Indian goods. If you look at an Indian household in India, if they find an Indian made cotton cloth and a foreign cloth in the market, Indians will go and purchase only Indian made clothes. They will ignore the foreign made clothes. You look at the same scenario in the British market. In Britain, in the textile market, if there is an Indian made cotton cloth and if there is a British made cotton cloth, what did the British people purchase? Even they purchased only the Indian made clothes. They also ignored their own country's manufactured clothes in favor for the Indian made goods. Now this made the British textile manufacturers, the British cotton textile manufacturers, very jealous of Indians. And here is where the colonial British government as well as the British manufacturers joined hands and decided to overturn the Indian textile industry completely. Now let us see what the British did. The British initially started innovating their machines, and they were able to make certain power looms, certain looms which are able to spew out cotton clothes at a very high rate. So cotton clothes were able to be produced in large quantities in a short span of time. So the amount is high and the time is low, and because it is made by machines, unlike the cotton cloths which are made by the Indians, which are made by humans, which are made by men and women, because it is made by machines, the cost of production in British made cotton clothes was also less. So the cost is less, the amount of cloths produced is more, and the time is also less. So in every aspect they were able to purchase, they were able to produce these cheap cotton goods. Cheap, very cheap cotton goods were made by the British manufacturers. Now that they are making cheap cotton clothes, you try to sell these cotton clothes, the British manufacturers try to sell these cotton clothes once again in the market, And in spite of it being cheap, the British people continued to purchase only Indian cloths, because having an Indian made cloth was a symbol of status for the people of Britain back then. And what did the British manufacturers do? They certainly got jealous and they decided that Indian made cloths should not be sold in Britain, and they created a lot of barriers for those clothes from entering into Britain. So what did they do? In Britain, they formed a coalition with the British government and they enacted laws. Thereby, they put tariffs on Indian cloths. So nobody can they can import Indian cloths into Britain just like that. They need to pay a huge amount of tariff to bring it inside Britain. Any trader who wants to sell Indian made goods in Britain, they need to pay a huge amount of tariff. Because of this tariff, the cost of Indian made goods became very, very high. And obviously, that means people of Britain had to start purchasing British made goods because it is cheap now. That is one way. And also, they started putting fines. They formed a coalition with the government and they passed laws stating that you cannot purchase Indian made goods, Indian made cloths, and if you are found to possess some Indian made cloths, you will be fined some amount of money. It is illegal, they said. And this is also one way how they restricted the Indian cloths from entering into the British market. Now, it was very protective of their own manufacturing sector. The British government was acting in such a way, and you might assume that the British stopped only there, but that is not where they stopped. They decided to make all these changes in the Indian market also, and that's where there was a lot of problems. The British, they came to India and they realized that in spite of all those tariffs back then, in spite of all those fines, many Indian made goods are still going to Britain. So they decided we need to actually dismantle the cotton textile industry in India completely, and therefore they decided that we will form certain policies, we will use certain policies to dismantle the cotton textile industry. So what were those policies? The British colonial government in India, along with the British manufacturers of cotton textiles in Britain, they both joined hands and they enacted certain laws. They enacted certain new rules and code of conduct for the Indian textile industry here in India. So what did they do? In the Indian subcontinent, the British put the first law, which is all the raw material, meaning raw cotton, all the raw cotton which are produced in India can be sold only to the British. You cannot sell it to anybody else. The British told the cotton producers, the cotton farmers, they told that you can sell the cotton only to us. So they have already monopolized the raw material. Then after monopolizing the raw material, they told that if any Indian textile manufacturer, if he wants to purchase cotton, raw cotton from Indian farmers, as the farmers have already sold it to them, they can purchase only from the British. And what did they do? The raw cotton which was originally sold for 10 rupees was now sold for 100 rupees, 10 times the price, extremely increased. Now the Indian manufacturers, they cannot afford 100 rupees per unit of cotton, 10 times the price from what they originally paid. So obviously the Indian manufacturers themselves found it very difficult to appropriate the raw material to use it to produce textiles. So there itself the Indian textile industries are starting to fail. And not only that, the British also put in additional rules. They said that all the Indian cotton textile laborers, the people who actually do the yarning, cotton yarning and spinning and weaving, all those people will from now on work for the British only. They will work only for the British. So they are also monopolizing the labor force for themselves. The British have their own factories in India and they are saying that all these laborers can work only in their factories. And they didn't really stop there. While all these people are working in our factories, the British say, while you are all working in my factory, I will pay you only so much amount of salary. And originally they were getting, let's say for example, 100 rupees per month. Now they are getting 20 rupees per month. 1/5 of the original salary, which is very, very low. And it is not sustainable for the cotton laborers. And these laborers, they are struggling hard to work for the British, and the British are not letting these people to work in any other factory held by any Indians. Now the Indian manufacturers are saying that we would like to employ those cotton laborers. We can pay them the 100 rupees fully. It doesn't matter to us. So we want the laborers to come and work for us. They are asking the British. And the British told, finally after a long time, you can employ these cotton laborers, but as you employ them, you cannot give them salary beyond what we are giving them. And therefore, they have put in a law wherein which these laborers will never be able to get a good amount of salary for the work that they are doing. And therefore, eventually, all the laborers found that working in cotton textile industry was not viable and they started quitting cotton textile job altogether, cotton labor altogether. Slowly people started moving out of cotton textile industry and the Indian cotton textile industry began to be completely demolished from within itself. The British, they didn't stop there, they were still not done. What did they do? They started importing the finished goods from Britain into India, and they changed India itself into their market. Initially, it was the Indians who had markets all over the world, but now the British are treating India itself as a market for its own cotton textile goods, finished goods, its own cheap machine made goods. All the raw cotton from India, which the Indian manufacturers could not purchase because of the high cost, all that raw cotton was sent to Britain, to the British manufacturers, who once again use that to make the cotton textile in Britain and once again export the finished goods to India, where the British goods are dumped completely here. And because there is lots of cheap foreign goods available now, the Indian people also shifted to foreign made cotton clothes only, and the Indian cotton cloths were completely dismantled. Now what we just saw, what we just heard right now, that is just one example of how the British economic policies exploited the Indian traditional industries and dismantled the Indian social and economic life during the colonial era. There are many such examples like this. India used to have its market all over the world for its goods, and after the British started enacting laws to prevent Indian goods from reaching other countries in the world, you will notice that very soon there was a large scale unemployment in India, where people lost their jobs and large scale poverty also rising. All of this are a legacy of the British rule in India, and that's what we saw. So this is a story of how the British ruined the Indian cotton textile industry. See you again in the next video. Thank you.